Hey guys, it's Studio 11508, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this really cool hurry up timer using the Ultimate Timer asset on the Unity Asset Store. What's cool about the Ultimate Timer asset is that it allows you to call custom functions at timed intervals, and we're going to be using those in this project here. And with that, let's get started. First thing we're going to want to do is create a canvas. So we're just going to go to UI, Canvas, and then we're going to need a background so that we can see the Ultimate Timer against it. So let's create an image, and we're just going to go ahead and name this BG. And you'll notice it's a little bit too small for a working background. So what I'm going to do is go over here and click on the rect transform. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt so that the pivot points and position change to stretching in all directions. And there we go, we get a nice fill there. It's a little too white for me, so I'm just gonna make this off-white just so it's not too stark. So the next thing we're gonna wanna do is add a text field. This is going to be our countdown text. So with Text Mesh Pro created here, we're going to rename this countdown text. And as you can see, it's really hard to see right now, so we're gonna adjust some settings so that we can see it a little bit more clearly. All right, looks great. Let's close a few of these components here, and let's add the Ultimate Timer script to this text field so that we can output the time. So let's make sure we're on countdown. That looks great. Our timer's not paused. On our durations, we're just gonna make sure it's at 10 seconds. And under the output options, we are going to need a timer text field, which will be our countdown text. So once we drag it in there, this should be ready to go. So let's hit play. And there you have it. We have 9 seconds counting down, but you'll notice it's in time code and not in raw seconds. So let's fix that. All right, let's go ahead and hit stop. And let's change that output from time code to seconds. And let's hit play again. And there we have raw seconds counting down. Awesome. Now that we have raw seconds, we really don't need to have this say new text anymore. So let's just go back and reformat this so that it's in single seconds, and let's adjust a few more aspects of this text field. With our countdown text aligned in the way we want it to look, we are going to need to create some buttons in order to help us debug and use our timer to make sure everything's working correctly. So we'll just create a button, and I'm using Unity 2018. So one of the issues with creating a button is that it defaults to the old school text. So I'm just going to swap out old school text with a Text Mesh Pro text. This allows me to scale and see it in with super clarity. So we're going to adjust the height, and we're going to adjust the width and some coloring just so that we can get a better look at this button. I'm going to rename this to Start, and we're just going to bring up that font size so we can see it pretty well. And then let's name this to BTN Start. And we're just going to slide that over to the side, and we are going to Command D and duplicate. And we're going to name this BTN Restart. This lets us restart the timer once it gets down to its ending point without having to turn on and off the Unity project. All right, let's go ahead and hit play. And we're counting down from 10 seconds, which is a little too long for my taste if we're going to be going back and forth on this. So let's go back to our duration and change it to 3. And this should be a little bit more easier to work with. Looks better. And now that we're at the end, we're just going to try and hit restart, and nothing happens. So let's go ahead and fix that. The next thing that we need to do is get our restart button to talk to the countdown text field. So basically we need the timer to understand when to restart. So let's click the button, click the restart button, and on the onClick event, we're going to add a new event. And let's drag that countdown timer text right into that new field. And then to the right, we're just going to pull down and look for that Ultimate Timer drop down. And to the left, we're going to look for Restart Timer function. And there we go. Let's hit play. And we're counting down from 3. And if we hit restart, it looks like it starts all over again. Perfect. So the next thing we want to do is hook up that start button. And the start button essentially exists because we might not always want to start the timer every time we start the project. So let's pause the timer on the countdown text and hit play and just make sure that that does not count down. Perfect. And then you'll notice that if we try to hit the start button, nothing happens. And hitting the restart, of course, makes it restart, which is perfect. So let's go select that start button, and we are going to create a new on-click event. And again, let's drag the countdown text into the field. And under the functions of Ultimate Timer, we're going to be looking for that start timer function. We'll hit play, and nothing's happening until we hit start. And we have a countdown. And once it ends, we are able to restart it as well. Great, now we have working buttons so that we can interact with this timer. All right, we'll hit stop. And the first thing I want to do here is a little bit of house cleaning. I want to change that display to a couple of dashes just so that we're display agnostic when it comes to our duration. We're going to go ahead and change that to 10, by the way, to prepare for our messaging function. So when we get halfway through, we're going to call a new message. And in order to set that up, we're going to create a new TextMesh Pro game object. And we're just going to set this up so that we can see it. I'm going to give it a dark text. I'm going to pull that width out and that height out a little bit. Let's align that center on all axes. And we're just going to give this a basic message, calling it complete the task. Let's bring that font size up a little bit. And we're probably going to need a little bit more width. And let's go ahead and name this message. Now that we have this set up, we're going to need to create a brand new C# script. And let's call this Message Manager. This is ultimately what is going to help the Ultimate Timer talk to the message text component, giving it the right message to display at the right time. Let's open our C# script and let's do a little bit of editing. Right away, we can get rid of our update function and that little piece of commented out code right there. We're also going to be using TMP Pro since we're using TextMesh Pro. Let's create our first public variable, TextMesh Pro, and we're going to call it message. And let's go back to Unity really quick. I like to drag my variables into my public scripts once I make them. It's kind of my neurotic thing. So let's go to the message that we created, a game object, and let's drag that into our new script so it can find that TextMesh Pro field. Now, back here, we can now create our first public function. And we're just going to call this hurry up. And what this function is going to do is basically tell the text to display hurry up whenever this is called. We're going to hit save, go back into Unity. And what we need to do now is tell the Ultimate Timer script at what point do we want to launch this hurry up function. So we'll scroll all the way down to the event intervals. And in the array, we're going to just put a value for 1 since we're only using one interval. And under the element dropdown, first thing we can do is give it a name. So we'll call it hurry up. And then under the next input would be the time at which we call the function, how many seconds into the timer. So we're just going to use 5 since that's half of 10. And then we're going to open up a new function underneath to call. And we're going to pull that directly from the message game object, which is where our message manager script sits, which has that public function that we can call from the dropdown that we just created. And there's hurry up. Now when the timer reaches 5 seconds, we should see this hurry up message being called instead of the complete task message. So let's hit start. And at the 5-second mark, we should see hurry up man. Awesome. So far, so good. All right, let's go ahead and shut that off. And let's go back into Visual Studio. We're going to create a brand new public function for game over. Actually, before we do that, let's get rid of that start function and continue writing our script for function for game over. Let's just copy that message text from hurry up. And instead of saying hurry up, we're just going to want it to say game over. Great, we can save, go back to Unity. And within our countdown timer game object, we're going to go to the ultimate timer script. And at the very bottom, we're going to close up that event intervals because we're not going to be using intervals. We're just going to be using the functions at the timer complete. And you'll notice here on timer complete, we have some built-in functions. We can stop, we can reset, restart, disable game object, or destroy game object. But we're not going to be using any of those here. Instead, we're going to be calling our own custom inspector. By clicking this button, we are now telling the script that we're going to be using a function. So here in the open field, we're going to drag our message game object that has our message manager script on it. And we're going to find that through the drop down to the right. We're going to find message manager, and we're going to find our brand new game over function that we just created. There we go. So now when the script hits the end, it should display game over instead of complete task in that message field. Let's hit play and see what happens. And our hurry up man triggers at 5. And there's the game over. Everything's looking great. Now that we learned how to call functions through the ultimate timer script at specific intervals and at the end of the script, you're pretty much done here. But if you want to give your timer that blinking effect that gives it a little bit more anxiety towards the end of your timer, that gives it that hurry up feel, let's continue on. So in order to create that blinking effect, we're going to need 2 more game objects, each with their own ultimate timer script, one to handle fading in and one to handle the fading out. So I'm just going to go ahead and create an empty game object, and we're going to call this fade out. We're going to add an ultimate timer script to this. And since this will be handling the fading out, we want our duration to not be 10 seconds. That's a little too long for a fade out. Let's just bring it down to 1. And then under the image fade output option, let's click the drop down to fade out. And you'll notice we have 2 options here. We have an image and we have a canvas group that we can fade. And the reason why canvas group exists is because we can't actually fade out text. It just won't recognize it. So in order to get around this, we can go ahead and highlight our countdown text, and we can simply add a canvas group. And what a canvas group lets you do is it gives you the ability to group text items and image items, but you can also adjust their alpha transparency, as you can see here, which is really, really, really cool. So we're going to print this back to 1. Ultimate timer will recognize your canvas group. So we're going to click back to the fade out ultimate timer script, and we're going to scroll back down to the image fade. And let's drag our countdown text that now has a canvas group associated to it, and it looks like it's able to accept it. This looks great. Let's go ahead and hit play, and what we should see right away is a 1-second fade. And actually, let's go down to our timer complete. Let's make sure it restarts so that we can just start seeing this fading in and out over time as we're watching it in this example. So here we are. For every second, we get a single fade. You'll notice that when this fades out, it just pops back in. So let's create a script to fade it back in so that it looks a little bit more smoother. All right, let's close that out. Now that we have our fading out created, let's go ahead and duplicate that and create a fade in. Now we'll go to the ultimate timer script and everything looks good. The only thing we want to change on our output option under image fade, the fade type should be fade in. So this will fade the text back in once it's faded out. But instead of having these play at the exact same time, let's play these in order. So we'll click to the fade out and we'll scroll all the way to the bottom. And instead of restarting, we can just say stop, and moreoverly, we're going to want to call a custom inspector function. And that function basically lives on the fade in. And we're just basically telling the fade in to find the ultimate timer script and start. So when the fade out completes, we're going to tell fade in to begin. And respectively, we should go into the fade in. And instead of having fade in restart, we're going to have it stop. We're going to have this call the fade out to start as well. And this should cause a looping fading in and fading out. Let's hit play and see what it looks like. And it looks like our 10 fades in and fades out perfectly. All right, now that we have our fading in and fading out, let's just make these a little bit faster. I'm going to highlight the fade in and fade out at the same time, and under their ultimate timer durations, I'm going to change that 1 second to 0.3 seconds. We're going to hit play, and we should see a little bit faster of a blinking situation. This looks much better. This says urgency to me. So let's hit stop. And now we don't want this blinking playing right off the bat. We want this to start playing halfway through the timer. So what we're going to do is, just like we have the hurry up man changing from in our text field, we're reusing a event interval for that. So with our countdown text highlighted and using the ultimate timer script there, we're going to go to our event interval, and we're going to change the size to 2, which means we're going to add another interval. And it's just going to duplicate the hurry up. Let's call this one fade out. And we want this to happen at interval 5, just like our hurry up. And we're going to grab the fade out and drag it into our open field. And just like we did with the other functions, to turn them on and turn them off, we're going to have this start. And it looks like that's all we really need to do. So let's hit play, and we should start seeing fading around the 5-second mark. And the reason why this is not happening is because we need to go into both fade in and fade out, and we just need to make sure that they're paused at the very beginning. So let's hit play and see if that helps. And we're going to go ahead and hit start. At the 5-second mark, we should start seeing some blinking. There we go. Oh, but you'll notice it continues to blink even after game over. And that might not be an issue for you if you plan on moving to another scene, but if you need this to hold still, we can fix that as well. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So in order to keep the fading from continuously happening at the very end of the countdown text, at the very end of the timer, we're basically going to want to go to our countdown text, and under the ultimate timer, we're going to scroll all the way down to where we're at the timer complete options. And what we want to do here is basically tell the fading in and fading out timers to just chill for a second. So we're going to create a brand new function, and we're going to drag our fade out, and we're going to want to tell the fade out to simply reset. So it'll start back at its very first frame and hold. And since we don't want fade in continuing to blink as well, let's make a separate function for fade in, and let's drag that in there, and we're just going to tell fade in to pause. Now this ought to take care of that continuous blinking at the very end. So we're going to hit play and hit start. And we have a solid, non-blinking game over 0. Awesome. So now you know how to string together timers, call custom functions at any point in time, and trigger events when timers complete to create interesting animations. Guys, thanks for checking out the tutorial, and if you have any questions or feedback, let me know in the comments section below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next tutorial.